and we have hey vav.
Yeah, hey Bob.
If a pit belongs to two partners and the first one passes by it and does not cover it, and the second one passes by and does not cover it, the second one is liable. If the first one covers it, the second one comes and finds it uncovered and does not cover it, the second one is liable. If he covers it properly and a bull or a donkey falls into it and dies, he is exempt. If he does not cover it properly and a bull or a donkey falls into it and it dies, he is liable. If he fell forward because of the sound of digging, he is liable. Backward because of the sound of digging, he is exempt. And if an ox with his trapping falls into it and they break, or a donkey with the trappings and they tear, he is liable for the animal, but exempt for the trappings. If a bull that was deaf, foolish, or young falls into it, he is liable. A male child or female child, a male slave or female slave, he is exempt. A bull and all other animals are alike as regards falling into a pit. Separation from Mount Sinai, the twofold payments with returning a loss, unloading, muzzling, kalayim, and the Sabbath. The same applies to wild beasts and fowls. If so, why is ox or donkey stated? Because scripture speaks of the usual. If one brings a sheep into a fold and locks the door before it properly, but it gets out and damages, he's exempt. If he does not lock the door before it properly and he gets out and damages, he's liable. If he breaks at night, or if robbers break in and he goes out and damages, he's exempt. Should robbers take it out, the robbers are liable.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So now we just said that in this Mishnah that you just read, that if you lock the pen properly in front of the animal and it still managed to escape, you'd be pater. However, Mishnah Bet qualifies this. Hinicha b'chama, or so if he left the animal in the sun, where okay, granted it's locked normally, but the sun is going to make the animal go crazy because it's sitting in no shade or whatever, so it's going to try really hard to get out. So therefore, that's a negligence that he left it in the sun and it's going to try harder to get out. Okay. Or shemasara lechereshot of a katan, or he gave over its he said, yeah, to chereshot of a katan, yeah, you look after this animal. Right, they can't look after it properly, so that's again a negligence on his part. If it went out and caused damage, now chayev, so he's liable for that, for his negligence. Okay, Masar leroy, if he hands it over to a shepherd, nichnas haroy tachtav. Now we saw that halacha before. That's we learned in the previous mission in Dalad Tes that if he hands it over to anyone else, then the new shomer is liable.
Oh, right.
So what is this talking about? The Gemara explains that this is talking about with the shepherd himself distributes his load to other shepherds who are working underneath him. So let's say you've got he's basically subcontracting to other shepherds. So he goes and gets all the flocks from all the neighbors, and then he subcontracts the flocks to other apprentice shepherds or whatever. So even in such a case, nichnas haroy tachtav, the other shepherds take his place, and they are liable for any damages. Nafla legina venenes. Now, what happens if an animal falls into a garden? So it was walking and it tripped and fell and fell into the neighbor's garden and it ate the tulips. So this is it only has to pay for the benefit. In other words, what the equivalent amount of barley would be that the animal ate, because it's just the benefit that it got. It's not a normal thing for the animal to fall into the garden. However, if it walked in the normal way and say, there's some food in the garden, and now it goes in and eats the tulips, then it's liable for the full damages for intruding into the neighbor's property and eating the tulips. Okay. How do you judge the damage that's caused to the field? Okay, the shamin base sadeh. So instead of just looking at the actual produce that it ate, you got to look at the field as a whole, says the Mishnah, because otherwise it can be too much of an imposition on the mazik. So you look at the whole field, Kamma haisa yafa, but Kamma hi yafa. So basically, you take a look at the whole field and say, how much would somebody pay for a whole field that's full of produce like this? And now and now subtract the produce that got eaten and say how much is the field worth, and that turns out to be a smaller differential because you know Are you okay?
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Okay, because any potential buyer, you know, is not going to look too much at that one corner of field that got munched. Okay. The Rabbi Shimon Omer, Achla Peres Gemurim. So that's true if it says Rabbi Shimon. That's true if the produce was still unripe. But Achla Peres Gemurim, Mishalemes Peres Gemurim. Then once it no longer leaves the ground, if the fruit is already ripened, you could harvest it now, so it doesn't even need the ground. Then the assessment of the damages has to be according to the value of the fruit itself, not according to the value of the ground. The im sa'a im sa'a saim, and whatever it ate, and you have to pay because the produce was already ripe and ready to be harvested. So that's direct damages, and the halacha does follow Rabbi Shimon. Okay. Makdish b'soch sadeh shel chavero shelo b'rshus. So now a person makes a haystack from his. He makes a stack of his produce in his neighbor's property without permission. Okay, we've seen this kind of case before. And now the cow comes and sees this pile of produce and eats it. Pater, of course he's pater because who gave him permission? The im huzka behen, and if the cow got damaged by them, then the person who put it in there is basically put a bore inside his neighbor's property and it damaged the cow. So now he's chayav for that. Now this is the one point where we have a departure from our previous Mishnah, because the previous Mishnah, if you recall, Rebbe says that which is the halacha actually, Rebbe says that if the person said birshut, yeah, you can put it here, that's not the equivalent of taking responsibility. It's just saying, yeah, okay, I don't mind if you put it here, but I'm not taking responsibility unless he explicitly says, okay, I'll take responsibility for it. But in this case, Rebbe doesn't say anything about it. So what's the case that we're talking about? The case here is talking about where we have where the Baal Sadeh is he's using he's renting, I don't know, renting, but he's saying a lot of people are putting all of their stacks into one field, and they appoint a shomer there. And since they put a shomer there, and he's got rishus to put the gadish in the place where the shomer is, it's taken as implicit that the shomer is saying to him, yeah, I'll look after it for you. In which case, he is taking on the responsibility, and even Rebbe would agree that he would be chayav for looking after it. Okay. Mishna Dalet Hasholech es habeira b'yad cheresh shoti v'katan. So if somebody gives a flame, it gives a flaming torch to a cheresh shoti v'katan, right? People who are not responsible for things. So straight away you can see this is going to be a negligence. Pater b'deinei adam v'chayev b'deinei shamayim. So now the katan goes out carrying this torch and accidentally sets fire to something else. Okay, so now the owner comes and wants to sue the person who gave the fire to the katan. He said, and the guy will say, "But look, I didn't do it. The katan did it." And the court will say, "You know what? You're right. We can't force you to pay this." But comes Yom Kippur, you know, you're gonna come and say that you're not responsible for this. You know, we're not going to force you to do it. But if you want to have a clean account with Hashem and with people, you should pay it anyway. Okay, so somebody who's Yarei Shamayim will pay this. Will pay the damages for this. Okay, Shilach biyad pikeach chayav. Now, if he sends the flame in the hand of somebody who's competent, then of course the person who's competent is responsible for their own actions. It's not his responsibility at all, and there's not even a dinei shamayim that he should have to pay it. So one person brought some matches, and he lit a little fire, but it was going to go out, and a second person came and put some wood on the fire so that it grew bigger. And then the fire spreads and causes damage. The guy who came second is chayav, because without him, the fire was going to go out. He put the wood on and he made the flame grow. And similarly in reverse, so a guy put down a bunch of wood in a pile, but there's nothing happening. It's just dry wood. Nothing's happening. And another guy strikes a match and sets fire to it. And maybe it's a ur chayav. The guy who lit the fire is the one who's chayav. He's the last one who did an action that made the flame come about. Ba acher v'liba. Now let's say you had just a normal little campfire and everything was safe, and another guy comes with a bellows or whatever it is, something to blow the air, and he says, let's make this fire nice and big. So he blows it nice and big, and now the fire catches and it sets fire to the neighboring field. Then the person who blew the fire higher is now chayav, because again he's the one who caused the flame. But if it was just a normal campfire and suddenly a huge wind came up, this we say is an ruach she'eina mitzuya. This is an abnormal wind, something that they could not have foreseen. Kulan paturin. However, just in parentheses over here, if this was a regular wind that they could have expected, then that's considered negligence. If you light a fire where a regular wind could set fire to the field, that's negligence, and the person who lit the fire would be chayav. And by the way, a ruach mitzuya is different depending on where you are. Like a ruach mitzuya by the coast is probably stronger than a ruach mitzuya in Beit Shemesh or in Gush Etzion. Their ruach mitzuya is very strong.
Right.
So that affects a whole bunch of other halachas, like for example the sukkah. The sukkah walls have got to be able to stand up in the ruach mitzuya of right. Neve Daniel or whatever. Okay. So if somebody lights a fire and it went and consumed wood or even stones or dust, like it can bake the ground hard. That's called nezek shenema ki sete ish umatza kotzim v'nechal gadish or hakama or sadeh shalem yishalem hamavir es habeira. So the pasuk states it out in full that if a person starts a fire, he's liable for the damages, no matter what it damaged, even whether it's a field or if it's standing grain or haystack or anything, he's still chayav. Avra gader shehu gavua arba amos. However, if the flame jumped over a wall which is 4 amas high. Now 4 amas high is pretty tall. I mean that's like if I had to stand up with my arms extended, that would probably be 4 amas. Okay, so if there's a wall in between and the fire nonetheless managed to jump that wall, or derech harabim, or it managed to cross over a public thoroughfare, or it crossed over a river, that is patur for, because that's not a normal thing to happen.
Right.
Okay. Hamadlik b'toch shelo. If he lights inside his own property, ad kama tavo hadleka. Okay, so how much space does he have to give? If he's lighting inside his own property to be sure that it's not going to spread to somebody else. Rabbi Elazar ben Azari Omer ro ino saki ilu hi be'emtza base core. You got to say it's inside the middle of a base core. Now, a base core is a field that you would be able to sow a core of seed in, which is approximately Kahati gives the number. It's about 75,000 square amas. Right, 137 amas squared. Okay, so that's the amount of space that you have to leave around your fire to be sure that it's not going to spread. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Omer 16 amos. No, it's not that big. 16 amas is enough because like the Kaderech Rishas Harabim, because we just saw above that if it jumps over Rishas Harabim, you pass on that because 16 amas is considered enough. So you don't have to go all the way up to base core. The 137 amas, that's excessive, says Rabbi Eliezer. It's enough that he leaves 16. Rabbi Akiva Omer 50 amma. He says 50 amas. Okay, what's in each direction? Kati doesn't give an explanation as to why. Rabbi Shimon Omer Shalem Yishalem Hamavir Sabeira Hakol Lefi Hadleka. So Rabbi Shimon's opinion is that it all is in accordance with the size of the fire that he's making. Okay, if he's making a massive fire, then he obviously has to leave a bigger space. If he's just making a little fire, then okay, then he doesn't have to have too much space. It's all in accordance with the size of the fire that he's making, how much space he has to leave around it to protect the neighbors. And the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon here.
All right.
Okay. Let's go back to Gimel Hay.
Okay. Okay. Gimel Hay. If one came with his jug and another came with his beam, and this one's jug broke on that beam, he was exempt. Since this one has the right to walk and that one has the right to walk. I thought we did this last time.
I've got on my Chazara schedule the Gimel Hay is right.
Oh, I have. It's not Gimel Het.
Gimel Hay. No, Gimel Hay. I've got Gimel Hay for today.
All right. All right. Let me see. I'm pretty sure we did this. Okay. If one came with his jug and another came with his beam, and this one's jug broke on that one's beam, he's exempt. Since this one has the right to walk and that one has the right to walk. If the owner of the beam was first and the owner of the jug second, and the jug broke on the beam, the owner of the beam is exempt. But if the owner of the beam stopped, he's liable. If, however, he said to the owner of the jug, stop, he is exempt. If the owner of the jug was first and the owner of the beam second, and the jug broke on the beam, he's liable. But if the owner of the jug stopped, he is exempt. If, however, he said to the owner of the beam, stop, he's liable. The same applies if one comes with his candle and this one with his flax. The reason I think we did this was because I remember stupidly when I was doing this, I was thinking of like an Abbott and Costello thing or something. That's why I was thinking about it.
We did this a week ago.
Yeah, all right, okay. If two were going in a public domain, one was running and one was walking, or both were running and they injured one another, both are exempt. If one chops wood in a private domain and damages in the public domain, or in a public domain and damages in a private domain, or in a private domain and damages in another private domain, he is liable.
Okay. All right. Gittin.
I have to check mine. So Gittin. Okay.
Yeah.
Gittin, Zion, Aleph.
Yes.
If one who was seized by delirium said, write a get for my wife, did not say anything else, if he said, write a get for my wife, and was seized by delirium, and he then said, do not write it, his latter words are worthless. If one became mute and they said to him, shall we write a get for your wife? And he nodded with his head, and they test him 3 times. If he said no for a no and yes for a yes, they may write and give it. If they said to him, shall we write a get for your wife? And he said to them, write. And they so told the scribe, and he wrote, or witnesses, and they signed. Although they wrote it, signed it, and gave it to him, and he in turn gave it to her, the get is void unless he signs, says to the scribe, write, and to the witnesses, sign. If a man said, this is your get if I die, this is your get if I die from this illness of mine, or this is your get after my death, and he has not said anything, If he said this get should take effect from today if I die, and from now if I die, it is a get. But from today and after my death, it is a get and not a get. If he dies, she performs kalitza, but not yibum. If he said, this is your get from today if I die from this illness of mine, and then he rose and went to the marketplace and became ill and died, we assessed him. If he died from his first illness, it is a get, and if not, it is not a get.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Kasubos.
Okay, Yud Gimel Hay. If one stipulated to give money to his son-in-law and subsequently reneged, she should sit until the hair turns white. Adam says she can say, had I stipulated for myself, I would sit until my hair turns white. Now that my father has stipulated for me, what can I do? Either marry me or divorce me, said Rabbi Gamliel. I approve of Admon's view. If one contests the ownership of a field and he signed on it as a witness, Admon says he can say, the second one is amenable to me and the first one is more powerful than he. The sages, however, say he has lost his rights. If he made it as a boundary mark for another, he lost his right. And if someone oversees to the path, to the path, and the path to his field was lost, Admon says he may go with the shortest path. The Kamma, however, say he must buy a path even for 10,000 zuz or fly in the air.
Right. I like that imagery. Buy it or fly through the air.
Okay, we have Zion Tess in Turban. Yossi says, to what do these words apply? To the installation of the Erev, for the remnants of the Erev, any amount. For they only required an Erev in courtyards and not to let the children forget. Any food that may be used to make an Erev or a shittuf except water or salt, these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Yeshua says, a loaf is an Erev. Even if it is baked from a saw, but it is broken, it may not be used for an Erev. A loaf worth an Isser, but which is whole, may be used for an Erev. A person may give a ma to a grocer or to a baker in order that he gives him his possessions in an Erev. And these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. For the Kamma say his money does not affect possession, but they concur that in regard to other people, his money gives him possession, and we cannot make an Erev for a person except with his consent. Rabbi Yehuda said, to what do these words apply? To Erevim Techumin. But in regard to Erevim Katzeros, we make an Erev with his consent, or without his consent, but we may benefit a person in his absence. But we may not disadvantage a person except in his presence.
Right. Right, because the Erev Katzeres is a win-win proposition. There's absolutely no loss, but so
Right.
it's a no-brainer. But an Erev Techumin, you lose what you gain on the other side. That needs specific permission.
Okay, Nida.
Yeah. Aleph
Okay.
Dalet.
Aleph Dalet. What is meant by a virgin? Any girl who had never discharged blood in her life, even if she is married. Regarding a pregnant woman, her time suffices for her only from when her fetus becomes notable. Regarding a nursing woman, her time notice suffices for her until she weans her child. If she gives her child to a wet nurse, or she weaned him, or he died, Ramea says she conveys tumor retroactively for 24 hours, for the Kamma say her time suffices for her. What is meant by an old woman? Any woman for whom 3 periods have passed near her old age. And Rabbi Eliezer says any woman for whom 3 periods have passed and her time suffices for her. Rabbi Yossi says a pregnant woman and a nursing woman for whom 3 periods have passed, their times suffice for them. And regarding what did they say that the time suffices for her? With regard to the first discharge of blood. But with regard to the second discharge, she conveys tumor retroactively for 24 hours. But if she expressed the first discharge as a result of the external stimulus, then even for the second discharge, her time suffices for her.
Okay. And Chulin.
You know, you're dollar. If one converted, if one who converted owned a cow, if it was slaughtered before he converted, he is exempt. If it was slaughtered after he converted, he is obligated. If it is uncertain, he is exempt because the burden of proof is on the one who seeks to exact payment from the other. What is the foreleg? From the carpus to the shoulder blade, and that is the one of the nausea. And corresponding to that, in the hind leg is the thigh. The Yehuda says the thigh is from the heel joint to the knee joint. Which is the jaw? Which is the jaw? From the point of the jaw until the opening of the trachea. The mitzvah of giving the first of the fleece applies both in the land and outside the land, when the temple exists and when the temple does not exist, to unconsecrated animals but not consecrated animals. The stringency of the floor is the foreleg, the jaws, and the law over the law of the first of the fleece, in that the law of the foreleg, the jaws, and the law applies to cattle and to flocks, to many and to few, whereas the law of the first of the fleece applies only to sheep and it applies only to many. How many are considered many? If Shammai says 2 sheep, as it is stated. A man will sustain a calf and 2 sheep. If Hillel says 5, as it is stated, 5 prepared sheep. The Dosa ben Harkin says 5 sheep, each of which is short of a mana and a half, are subject to the law of the first of the fleece. But the Kamma say 5 sheep that are short of any amount. How much shall we give him? The weight of 5 selim in Judah, and which is the equivalent of 10 selim in Galil, least but not dirty, enough to make a small amount garment out of it. As it states, we shall give to him, that there should be enough in it for a gift. He did not manage to give it to him until he dyed it. He is exempt. If he had bleached it but did not dye it, he is obligated. If one buys the fleece of a Gentile sheep, he is exempt from the first of the fleece. If one buys the fleece of another sheep, if the seller has left some over, the seller is obligated. But he did not leave anything over, the buyer is obligated. If he had 2 kinds, the dark and the white, and he sold them the dark ones but not the white ones, the males but not the females, this one would give for himself, and what that one must give for himself.
Okay. Shkoyach.
We'll see you.
We're done.